I can. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Jane.
Excellent.
So, yes, you're going to be telling us how decapod welfare is driving UK retailers' sourcing policies. So, over
Yes.
to you. I look forward to it.
Okay. So let me just share this. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. Okay. Can you see my slides? Great. I'll take those. Yes. Lovely. Okay. So just as a quick introduction for anyone who doesn't know us, Crustacean Compassion is a UK-based, evidence-led, non-profit animal welfare organisation that was founded 8 years ago to work for the humane treatment of decapod crustaceans in the food supply chain and elsewhere. As has been mentioned, decapods have been legally recognised as sentient in the UK since the passing of the Animal Welfare Sentience Act in April 2022. However, we found at the time that there was very little transparency about and for food companies at that time about the decapod welfare practices and policies that were being used, and also very little guidance on what good welfare should look like, particularly with this new change in status for decapods. So in the same year, we launched the Snapshots, which was the first benchmark of its kind on decapod crustacean welfare, to provide transparency, accountability, and support to companies in the decapod supply chain. The first report, which was compiled in 2022, compiled a baseline of working practices and policies across 30 UK companies, including all the major supermarkets. Although in that report, which was first published in January 2023, we didn't publish the company scores and rankings straight away. This was an information gathering exercise for us and for the industry. Then the second assessment was carried out in 2023. And when that report was published very early this year, the company scores and rankings were published for the first time. And we found that in just the first 12 months, we saw significant advances in the way that retailers, producers, and processors were approaching their duty to decapod welfare. So just to quickly whiz through our key findings in 2023, we found that decapod crustacean welfare as a business issue had advanced significantly, with a number of companies publishing policies on key welfare issues more than doubling. In 2022, the first snapshot report had found that only 43% of companies had a decapod welfare policy of any kind, but in 2023, that had increased to 57%. We found that at least twice as many companies were now publishing specific decapod welfare policies covering capture method, mutilations, holding and transport conditions, and all the sale of live decapods to the public. The leading company score based on publicly disclosed information had been 42% in 2022. That had increased to 90% in 2023. And the average overall score across all 30 companies, regardless of sector, was 14% in 2022, but saw a notable increase to 24% just a year later. We also saw that some clear leaders were already emerging across the retailer and processor sectors. Last year, Marks and Spencer's led the table with 90%, followed by Waitrose on 71% and Young Seafood on 64%. We found that 8 companies had more than doubled their score since the first snapshot assessment, which clearly demonstrated there were either more developed decapod welfare policies this time, or greater communication around the issue in terms of publishing those policies, or a combination of the two. And we found that the 10 most improved companies had increased their overall score by between 13 and 55% of the available total. We also found that for the second year, retailers were continuing to outperform processors and producers on average in all scoring areas except for innovation and leadership. So across the management commitment and policy, governance and management, and performance reporting and impact scoring sections, on average, retailers were striding ahead of their supply chain. The innovation and leadership section, in which producers and processors scored more highly, that covers involvement in research and development projects and industry initiatives that aim to improve decapod welfare standards. It also looks at whether companies are communicating directly with consumers to raise awareness of decapod welfare issues. And it was in these areas that processors and producers were on average showing more activity, which could have been directly related to the fact they tend to have more direct control over working practices than perhaps retailers do. So between the second and the third benchmark assessments taking place, we continued our work to support companies in creating or developing decapod welfare policies that would continue to meet the expectations of buyers and consumers as they evolved. So as part of this, we launched the Crustacean Industry Welfare Hub last year, which is a free members-only online resource which collates a whole wealth of information about decapod welfare in one place. This summer, the third snapshot assessment took place, and the snapshot 2024 report will be released in the early part of next year. I can't reveal individual scores and rankings to you today because those will be released in the main report, but I can talk briefly about the trends that we've seen over the last 12 months or so since the last assessment. We were expecting to see significant score improvements for many benchmark companies even before the assessments began in the summer, due to the many new and updated policies that we'd seen, some of which have been fairly highly publicised. And the policy areas that have seen greater or more detailed attention from a growing number of retailers, as well as other benchmark companies, have included more electrical stunning provision for both farmed and wild-caught decapod species. And this includes the extension of existing solutions and the advancement of new electrical stunning provision for additional species. Official commitments to refuse to sell live decapods to members of the public, which is a situation in which the humane handling, transportation, storage and slaughter of the animals can't be guaranteed. And intentions to investigate humane alternatives for as yet unaddressed issues, such as claw nicking, and exploring welfare improvements for previously ignored species. The results that we've seen over the last 2 years, I think, demonstrate a growing momentum among retailers in particular to drive forward decapod welfare standards. And there's a clear direction of travel that we can see here, with welfare-focused retailers and processors showing commitment not only to eliminate the lowest welfare practices, but also striving to identify best practice even when higher welfare solutions don't currently exist, as we've seen today. Alongside practical policy commitments to change working practices and time-bound targets to improve standards, we've also seen retailers and processors and producers becoming increasingly vocal about their and their industry's responsibility to ensure humane treatment for decapods in the supply chain, at least insofar as statements within published policies and within business-to-business discourse, such as today's event. I've just picked out a few quotes from companies' published policies, which show the very public support for decapod sentience as a cause that needs to be urgently addressed by the seafood industry. And this is important because clearly setting out these intentions as part of their sourcing policies and plans means that seafood companies and retailers can have a really positive impact on decapod welfare awareness and set a positive example for the broader industry. Of course, the significant development we've seen this year in the UK was the release of the industry-led voluntary codes of practice for decapod welfare, which were published in the summer. And some companies that are benchmarked have suggested both before and since publication that they be guided by those industry codes of practice and cite their adherence to those as a measure of high welfare. We at Crustacean Compassion very much welcome the effort and attention that the project brought to decapod welfare. And we took part in the welfare panel during the development process and were pleased to provide feedback at every opportunity. Unfortunately, we're not able to support the current version of the codes in its entirety, but we continue to work with industry to encourage the universal adoption of the highest welfare practices as are identified both now and in the future. But in the meantime, the industry activity that we're seeing among retailers and also the wider supply chain on decapod welfare issues seems to recommend that suppliers shouldn't solely rely on adherence to the industry codes of practice, because as we're seeing, many retailers and processors' welfare requirements are already exceeding that guidance. For example, although the codes acknowledge that electrical stunning is best practice for large decapods, they don't require companies to use electrical stunning in order to be considered high welfare. But as we've seen just from presentations today, a move towards electrical stunning for both large and small decapods, wild-caught and farmed, is considered both popular and achievable welfare commitment for many companies. And some are already cutting out other methods of stunning and slaughter from their supply chain altogether. We've produced our own code of practice, which can be found on the Industry Hub and our website. And we'd also encourage companies to take a look at the Snapshot 2023 report for a detailed breakdown of how retailers and other companies have scored, and to look at their decapod welfare sourcing policies directly, because that gives a really clear indication of how companies are striving forward. Linda and Lynn's excellent presentation earlier today, of course, talked about the ongoing project to address the dispatch of live necrops at sea, which isn't currently covered by industry guidance. It's an unprecedented effort made by a coalition within the industry. And it shows that both retailers and processors are willing to invest in the future of the industry as a whole, and the urgency with which that's been treated has been really, really commendable, and shows a motivation to proactively and pre-competitively try to find solutions to these welfare challenges. So this evolving issue is clearly not standing still at all, and major retailers that have published new or updated or extended decapod welfare policies since the last snapshot assessment include Marks and Spencer, Tesco, Ocado, Waitrose, and Sainsbury's. So in conclusion, we're seeing a clear momentum across the supply chain to drive welfare change for decapods, which will ultimately position retailers to be able to tell a better story to consumers about the seed to plate journey of decapods than would previously have been the case. And of course, conversely, companies that are not keeping step with improved welfare expectations are, I think, already beginning to see those doors closing in terms of those retailers' supply chains. So this momentum really should be supported and encouraged by the sharing of this progress. And I was interested to hear Themis's presentation on the need for more information to come out to consumers, because I think they do need greater transparency and proactive education around the sourcing choices that retailers in particular are making to enable them to make informed choices about the seafood they buy. And increasing consumers' understanding of what retailers and their suppliers are doing to increase the range of higher welfare products available to them will have obvious benefits for sales and public perception of the seafood industry as a whole. So to finish, I'd just like to encourage anyone who isn't yet a member of the Crustacean Industry Welfare Hub to please sign up. It's free, quick and easy, and it includes exclusive webinars, and we will be holding one touching on the topic that we've just been discussing, the consumer communications methods. We're holding that on Wednesday, the 27th of November, and we hope that'll be helpful. Regarding the snapshot benchmark, we'll be able to provide more information about the findings of this year's benchmark assessments when the report is released early next year, and Hub members will get an exclusive first look at those results. So basically we're seeing good movement, demonstrable attention and momentum towards higher welfare policies, starting with consumers and working their way back down the supply chain, and we hope to see more of that in the future. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Jane. That was well, the progress you've described was really quite impressive over a relatively short time frame. So that's remarkable change. So well, excellent work, and obviously helped a lot by the legislation. So that's good to see. And thank you for the invitation to the hub as well. I will be joining. I'm not a member yet, but Michelle is. I'm not, but I will be. So thank you very much.